Okay, so I just resetted my code and came back to the very first starter code. And before we keep going, I want to make a few changes. So I'm going to have two variables, x and so I'm just going to declare them up in here because I want to be able to access them all over the program. And then I'm also going to have another one called speedx and speedy. So we're going to just change up a bit from the previous example. And what I will do is I will set up, in the setup, I will initialize my x as window width divided by 2 and my y as window height divided by 2. And then if I draw the circle in the position of x and y, I should be getting something in the center, the very perfect center. Great. And I think I can just initialize these like this. Okay. And what I can do is I can also increase the position, the location of the x and y by using speedx and speedy. So let's just do that. So I will just add speedx to x, and that should increase x each round. Perfect. And then we will do the same for y. Oops, sorry, a typo here. It's supposed to be capital. Great. And oh, now as you can see, as x and y, these values keep on increasing, my ball eventually goes out of the frame. And to prevent that from happening, I'm going to use an if statement, just like I used beforehand. So if my x is greater than width of the canvas, what I can do is I can just make speedx negative, so it starts going the other way. So that would be speedx times equals -1. And then I can also do it for y and height and speed y. So now that I run it, whoops, sorry, a typo, height. Yeah, I think that's, how do you, oops, okay, got it. Okay, there you go. And now it changes. But of course, I missed a few conditions and it is going to get outside from here. And then you can keep on doing this with more if statements. So, you know, if x is less than 0, I can make it negative, blah, blah, blah. And we will just end up with like multiple if statements for each and single case. But we can also combine it by using an AND statement. So when it comes to Boolean expressions, we have two statements. Maybe I'll just write these down in here. We have AND statement and we have an OR statement. The AND statement is represented by two AND sides side by side, and the OR statement it is representing by two vertical lines side by side. So let's talk about AND first. What AND statement does is, if it takes two separate statements, and if both of them are true, it gives you a true. But if one of them is false, the whole statement falls. Okay, so for an example of AND, maybe we can think about our report cards, like our graduation requirements. So what our graduation requirement says is that we can only graduate if we have over 120 credits and if we have a certain GPA. So that means that some person can have more than 120 credits, but if they have like a GPA lower than a certain threshold, they cannot graduate. So they need to have condition 1 and condition 2, both of them, for the statement to be true. But for OR, that's a different case. It is basically either one of the conditions have to be true. So maybe it can be like you can get extra credit if you do well in your exam, or if you do some project. So you do either of them and you can get extra credit. It doesn't need to be both of them true, you just need to do one. I don't know, I hope this helps to illustrate it a bit more. And when it comes to using it for these expressions, what I can do is I can merge these two statements together. And if it happens that width is greater than x is greater than width, or x is less than 0, I'm going to change my speed. So if x is greater than width, or x is less than 0, my speed becomes negative, and this can also become like the same case for y. If y is greater than height, or y is less than. So what happens is that if one of them is true, then the whole statement is true, and my speed becomes negative. Okay, so let's just run it over here and see if that has been the case. And this is a bit of fading. Yep. So the width and height cases are true. Let's see if the 0 cases are also getting catched by the if statement. Nice. Also, maybe let me just increase these to not make you guys wait for an eternity. Okay, in the next iterations it's going to be better. Okay, and there are also other things we can do when it comes to using and and or statements. And if, of course, the if statements. And that is something called an if-else statement. So maybe let me just start a different example in here. Let's have a few more variables. Let r is going to be 0. Let G, that's going to be 0. Let's B, which is also going to be 0. So the fill, let's make it RGB. And okay, I'm thinking that if the circle is getting drawn at a certain area, we can make the fill one color, and if it's getting drawn at different areas, we can make the fill at different colors. So let's start simple. Let me just move this to the back a bit, make the code make a bit more sense. This is getting rendered up in here. So when I run this, I'm just going to be getting black all over. But what I can do is, if x is greater than, so maybe we get like some area like this. Let me assume maybe if x is greater than 150 and it is less than 400, we can make our R fine, perfectly fine. And if it's outside of that area, which is the else statement, that means that in the case that this if statement is not true, we can set our R back to 0. So what is going to happen now is that if my x is greater than 150 and less than 400, so it's like around somewhere like this, I will start drawing my ball in red. So yeah, great, that's what's happening. And I can also add the condition for y to make it the perfect square. So if my y is greater than 150 and okay, it is also less than 400. Oops. Yeah, so I basically draw a rectangular area that's getting covered. It should be somewhere like this, only gets drawn in red. Great. And so what happens? Like we have this area already getting drawn in red. But if I want to draw a smaller area of it in a different color, then that's where I can use else if statement, if else statement, sorry. And what if else statement does is it's basically like if statement combined in iterative if statements. It checks one condition. If that condition is not true, then else, if else, you check this, if else, you check this, and it goes on basically forever until one of the conditions is met or you just exit in the else. So in here, what's happening is that if this condition is true, we make the R red, we make our color red, and if it's not, we make the color black. And the reason we want to use if-else condition is, maybe I can just demonstrate it. If I pick up a smaller area than this, like So maybe this time it is the area from 250. Okay, 250 to 300. Oops. And let's change blue. Comment this out. Okay, let's see if maybe it's a bit too small. Okay, yeah, I guess. Yeah, or maybe this is, yeah, a bit too small. Okay. I think I got the idea. I have like a smaller area set up. Let me just make this a bit larger. Okay. And this one also just a bit wider. So what's happening is that in a very small area, I want to draw blue. And in a bit of a larger area, I want to draw red. So we make the red 0, 2, and like blue 0, and else everything is 0. This is not going to work out just the way we expected right now, because in this example, what is happening is that this condition is true. So when the code is going through it, it is setting my blue to 255, red to 0, and then it goes and it checks, oh, this condition is also true, so it makes my blue to 0 and my red to its maximum. That's why I just end up getting red. But if I want to give the condition that, okay, you check this and make this true, and in the case that you have made this true, don't check anything else, then this is where using else if comes very handy. So when we have else if, what's happening is that my code, it checks all of these conditions and it's first come first serve. So and here is basically checking the condition of this small area, and if the ball is already within the small area, it changes the color and it doesn't bother with everything else. But if I didn't have it, then it will be changing it one by one. And in the case that this wasn't true, this is now then it gets checked. And the beauty of else if statements over if statements is that you can check multiple conditions in their increasing order of importance. So you check the something with more specific and you go from something more specific to more general, and eventually ending up in the ultimate else where nothing changes and nothing different happens. Of course, I hope this this illustration allowed you guys to understand if else statement a bit better and why it is more useful than just using bunch of if statements packed, back to back.